You say something more about how conceptual knowledge is related to this flexibility, because, for example, in the beginning, there's one box still has question mark in it.
Yes, it does. So in my original formulation here, I was taking as a given that knowledge was dichotomous, because most of the frameworks that people have adopted that have caught on in our field, they have two types. I think even though we're math people, we like two types, not three types or four types, but two types. And so the conceptual and procedural is one that is used commonly, but there have been others in the past, but they all have two types. And so I try to make it more complicated by saying that within these types, there's also this quality element, and that I put them together to make this 2x2 matrix. And in essence, what I do now is I talk about 3 of the 4 in my research. So I assess conceptual knowledge, which looks like this, and I assess procedural knowledge like this, and I assess flexibility in this. And so in that framework, flexibility is treated as if it were a separate thing, but it's really a part of procedural knowledge to me. But I'm acknowledging that most people in the field consider it not part of procedural knowledge, as something else. But I don't assess this at all, because I found that no one really cares about it. I feel like if I can convince people that it exists, I feel happy. Because if they believe it exists, then they then believe this 2x2. But if there are some people that don't believe this exists. That I write about this in this article, but and in some ways this was the most something that still is frustrating to me, but it exists among many people. Is if I go to someone and I say, tell me what conceptual knowledge means to you, and they tell me what this is, and I try to convince them that there's a difference between conceptual knowledge that you really understand, that's deep, and conceptual knowledge that's superficial. And what they would say is, they would say, if it's superficial conceptual knowledge, that's called procedural knowledge. So that's the logic, because they would say, if it's superficial, you don't understand it, then the phrase we use for knowledge you don't understand is procedural knowledge. And so then I would say, well, no, it's conceptual knowledge. It's knowledge of concepts, like let's say a definition. Let's say you have memorized a definition. For me, that's shallow conceptual knowledge. And then people have told me it back, no, it's memorized, so it's procedural knowledge. And so that's what I'm trying to get people to think differently about. And in some ways, I'm willing to have people accept flexibility as a third category, even though for me it's really not that, because it makes them talk about flexibility in a way that they didn't before.
One could argue that deep conceptual knowledge is like conceptual knowledge is a net, and in deep is where there is a lot of links, and then there is a lot of multiple representations. That would be deep. And then superficial is that, like the concept of derivative, you only know one way to look at it.
So here's another anecdote related to that. So I told you one conversation I have had that was frustrating to me about people thinking that superficial conceptual knowledge should be called procedural knowledge. So the flip of that I've also had is your situation, where I would say, someone would ask me, what does deep procedural knowledge look like? And I would say it's not, deep procedural knowledge is when procedural knowledge is connected to lots of things, because understanding is about connections. And so then what they would say to me is they would say, what you just described is conceptual knowledge. Because for them, if it has connections and it's understood, it's conceptual knowledge. And so I would say, no, it's about the procedure. The procedure has many connections that are deep. And they would say, no, because it's connected, it's conceptual knowledge. So that's the conversation that I react to in trying to put forth flexibility.